Ethan Callahan adjusted the straps of his worn backpack and surveyed the expanse of wilderness before him. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Montana mountains, painting the rugged terrain with hues of gold and green. He inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air that carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Ethan had always found solace in these solitary hikes, away from the noise of the world, armed only with his camera and an insatiable curiosity for nature's raw beauty. Today's destination was a remote ridge he had researched meticulously. It was said to offer unparalleled views of the valley below, but more importantly, it was rumored to be home to elusive wildlife rarely seen by human eyes. Ethan had envisioned capturing a moment that would make the cover of a Nature Magnet magazine, a shot so compelling it would tell its own story. As he trudged along the uneven trail, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots was the only sound breaking the silence. He paused occasionally to snap photos of the towering evergreens or the play of light on the rocky slopes. Each step felt like a step closer to the extraordinary. The trail narrowed as he climbed higher, the drop off to his right growing more curious with every turn. Suddenly a faint high-pitched sound reached his ears. He stopped, his senses sharpening. It was a cry, weak but persistent. His heart quickened as he scanned the area, trying to pinpoint its source. The sound came again, more desperate this time. Carefully stepping closer to the edge, Ethan peered over, his breath caught in his throat. Just below, on a narrow ledge, a tiny bear cub clung to the rocky outcrop. Its small frame quivered with fear as it let out another plaintive cry. The cub's dark eyes darted around, searching for a way out, but the jagged rocks above and the sheer drop below left no escape. Ethan quickly assessed the situation. The cub had likely slipped while exploring, and its mother was nowhere in sight. The ledge it stood on was barely wide enough to support it, and the violent river far below made the scene even more perilous. He felt a pang of helplessness mixed with a surge of responsibility. He whispered to himself, stating that he couldn't just leave the cub there, but how could he help without putting himself in danger? His mind raced with possibilities. Retrieving rope from his backpack, he contemplated if it could support him while he attempted a rescue. Ethan's heart pounded as he tightened the rope around his waist, securing it to a sturdy pine tree rooted firmly in the rocky soil. The cub's cries grew sharper, tugging at him with an urgency he couldn't ignore. Against his better judgment, he decided to act, fully aware the risks. He knew that climbing down would put his life in danger, but the thought of leaving the helpless animal to its fate gnawed at him. The idea of the cub slipping further and plummeting into the roaring river below was unbearable. He rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a carabiner and a makeshift harness fashioned from straps he carried for his camera gear. He hesitated briefly, testing the strength of each knob with trembling hands. This was not what he had prepared for when he set out that morning. He muttered under his breath, reasoning with himself, reminding himself of the potential dangers, but the cries of the cub cut through his doubts like a knife. Stepping cautiously to the edge, Ethan glanced down at the ledge. The distance was greater than he had initially estimated, and the jagged rocks made the descent even more treacherous. His muscles tensed as he began lowering himself, gripping the rope tightly. Each step brought him closer to the cub, but also closer to danger. His boots struggled to find solid footing on the crumbling rock face, and loose pebbles skittered down, disappearing into the depths below. Halfway down, his heart sank as he considered the possibility of the cub's mother returning. A protective bear could appear out of nowhere, and there would be no escape if she perceived him as a threat. He scanned the area, his senses heightened, but the wilderness remained eerily quiet. Even the usual chirping of Birds seemed to have faded, leaving only the sound of the river's relentless roar as he descended further. Ethan's mind wavered between fear and determination. The cub had stopped crying and was now staring at him, its small body trembling as it pressed itself against the rocky wall. The animal's vulnerability strengthened Ethan's resolve. He reassured himself, with every movement telling himself that he could do this, that he would save the cub and make it back to the top unharmed. But the cliffside had other plans. His foot slipped on a loose rock, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. He clung to the rope, his knuckles white, as he tried to steady himself. For a brief moment his mind screamed at him to turn back, to abandon the rescue and save his own life. The seriousness of his situation became painfully clear, and yet the cub's wide pleading eyes held him captive. Finally, Ethan reached the ledge. His feet landed on the narrow outcrop, and he pressed his back against the cliff for balance. The cub backed away, slightly unsure of his presence, but too exhausted to resist. Ethan moved slowly, speaking in a calm, soothing tone, hoping to gain the animal's trust. The cub whimpered but didn't try to escape, its small body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The cub, now silent, pressed itself further against the cold rock wall, its tiny frame trembling uncontrollably. Ethan remained still for a moment, careful not to startle it. His own body was tense, his muscles taut from the climb and the sheer danger of his position. He knew any sudden movement could either frighten the cub or send them both tumbling into the abyss below. He crouched low, balancing precariously on the narrow ledge, and began murmuring softly. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded loudly in his chest. He didn't know if the cub could understand the tone of his words, but he hoped it could feel his calm. He made no sudden movements, allowing the cub to observe him. Its dark eyes darted to his face, then to his hands, before glancing nervously at the sheer drop behind it. Ethan reached into his backpack, slowly pulling out the cloth sling he had prepared earlier. The cub flinched at the motion, its tiny paws scrabbling against the rock. In panic, Ethan froze, murmuring again in a steady rhythm. He took another step closer, his feet finding purchase on the unsteady ledge. He felt the rock shift slightly under his weight, and his stomach clenched. The cub's breathing was rapid, its fear palpable. Ethan stretched out the cloth, holding it open as gently as he could. The cub whimpered, unsure but too weak to resist. Slowly he edged closer, finally reaching the cub. Its fur was coarse under his fingers as he carefully scooped it into the sling. The cub struggled briefly, but his murmured reassurances seemed to soothe it. Just as Ethan secured the sling around his chest, he heard a sharp crack. The sound of a loose rock giving way echoed through the canyon. Before he could react, his footing slipped, his body lurched sideways, the rope jerking violently against his harness. He swung dangerously over the ledge, one hand grasping desperately at the rock. Face pain shot through his shoulder as he slammed against the cliff side, the force jarring him. For a terrifying moment he thought the rope might give way. His mind raced, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The cub whimpered in the sling, its tiny body pressing tightly against him. Summoning every ounce of strength, Ethan pushed himself upright, his injured shoulder throbbing with each movement. He steadied himself on the ledge, his legs trembling as he adjusted his grip on the rope. The climb back up now seemed even more difficult, his shoulder ached with every pull, the pain sharp and unrelenting. But the weight of the cub against his chest reminded him of why he couldn't give up. The ascent was agonizingly slow, each step felt heavier, the strain on his injured arm making it nearly unbearable. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes. He focused on the rope, on the small reassuring tug of the tree above, holding his weight. Finally, with one last pull, Ethan hoisted himself in the cub over the edge. He collapsed onto The solid ground his chest hung in as he gasped for air. The cub let out a soft cry, still trembling in the sling. Ethan lay there for a moment, the pain in his shoulder a dull throb. Now relief washed over him as he unfastened the sling and carefully placed the cub on the soft earth. The cub looked at him, its wide eyes filled with what Ethan could only describe as cautious trust. He leaned back against the tree, his body aching, but his heart full. He had done it, but something told him this ordeal wasn't over. Ethan's mission of capturing the forest beauty through his lens flashed through his mind, a bittersweet reminder of how far things had spiraled from his original plan. His camera bag, once neatly packed with high-end lenses and tools, now lay battered and scattered. The fall down the ravine had left some of his equipment damaged beyond repair. The glass of his favorite lens cracked and its frame bent. The tripod was nowhere to be found, likely lost during the scramble to save the cub. He glanced at the shattered pieces and felt a pang of disappointment. Those tools had been his way of preserving the forest's essence, of showing the world the hidden wonders of this untamed land. But now his focus has shifted entirely. Instead of snapping pictures, he was living the raw, untamed reality of nature, dangerous, unpredictable, and deeply humbling. Ethan barely had a moment to collect himself when a low rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. His muscles tensed, the relief he had felt seconds ago replaced by a jolt of fear. His eyes darted to the cub, now sitting on shaky legs and letting out a tiny, plaintive cry. The sound grew louder, and then she appeared, a massive figure emerging from the shadows of the trees. The mother bear was enormous, her dark fur glistening in the sunlight. Her powerful frame moved with deliberate intent, her sharp eyes locking onto Ethan and the cub. Ethan froze, his breath caught in his throat. He knew that running wasn't an option. Any sudden movement could provoke her. The mother bear advanced slowly, her gaze shifting between her cub and the strange human sitting mere feet away. Ethan braced himself, his body rigid, prepared for the worst. His injured shoulder throbbed as he tried to appear non-threatening. The mother bear stopped a few feet from the cub, her massive frame towering over them both. For a tense moment she stood still, her eyes fixed on Ethan. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but then something unexpected happened. The bear leaned down, nudging her cub gently with her nose. The cub responded with a soft cry, stumbling toward her. The mother bear's gaze returned to Ethan. There was no aggression in her posture, no hint of anger. Instead, there was something else, something almost like understanding. Her dark eyes lingered on him, and Ethan felt a strange sense of connection. It was as if she recognized his intentions and understood that he had saved her. Cub, the bear turned slowly, guiding her cub toward the forest. Ethan watched, his body still tense, as the pair disappeared into the trees just before vanishing. The mother bear looked back one last time, her gaze held an almost human-like quality, a silent acknowledgement that left Ethan in awe. When they were gone, Ethan collapsed back against the tree, his body finally relaxing. The forest was quiet once more, but his heart was full. It was a moment he would never forget, a reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the wild. Ethan returned home, still shaken but deeply moved by his encounter with the mother bear and her cub. His cabin nestled at the edge of the forest felt like a sanctuary. The quiet surroundings were comforting, yet something about the experience lingered he couldn't shake. The feeling that the mother bear's gaze had been more than just a look. It had carried a depth, almost as though she had made a silent promise. The first strange occurrence happened 2 nights later. Ethan stepped outside in the early morning light, carrying his camera gear. On the ground near his cabin, he noticed deep claw marks etched into the wooden post of his porch. The marks were fresh, the edges splintered as if they had been made only hours before his first thought was a wandering bear with the positioning of the marks. Low and deliberate felt different as though they were meant to be noticed br. In it off as coincidence, Ethan continued with his day, but later as he walked along a nearby trail, he saw something unusual. A small pile of berries and roots sat neatly on a rock untouched and oddly placed nearby. Animals, especially deer and smaller creatures, would have devoured such food quickly, yet it was as though the offering had been left undisturbed, as if intended for him. Ethan felt the chill run down his spine. He glanced into the trees, scanning the forest edge, but saw nothing. Still, he couldn't shake the sense of being watched. That night, as he prepared for bed, a faint rustling outside his cabin caught his attention. Peeking through the window, he saw nothing out of place, but the forest seemed quieter than usual. Days passed and the strange occurrences continued. Each morning, Ethan found more signs of fresh claw mark on a nearby tree, small piles of food arranged neatly along his usual paths. It wasn't random. It felt intentional, as though someone or something was trying to communicate. Then one quiet afternoon, Ethan spotted them standing at the edge of the forest just beyond the clearing of his cabin. Was the mother bear. Her cub stood close by, still small but visibly stronger than when he had rescued it. The mother bear's gaze was fixed on Ethan, calm and steady. She didn't move closer, nor did she make a sound. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and unease. He stood frozen on his porch, watching the bears as they watched him. The cub seemed curious, taking small steps forward before retreating back to its mother's side. Ethan didn't dare move, unsure of what the mother bear wanted or why she had returned after what felt like an eternity. The bear nudged her cub gently and turned back toward the forest. They disappeared into the trees, leaving Ethan standing in stunned silence. He didn't know why she had come, but her presence felt deliberate, as if she were watching over him from that day forward. Ethan noticed more signs of her presence. He found tracks around his cabin, always at a safe distance, and sometimes heard faint rustling in the forest nearby. It was as though the bear had claimed the area around his cabin, ensuring his safety. Ethan couldn't explain it, but he felt an odd sense of protection. The connection between them was undeniable yet mysterious. Whatever bond had been formed that day on the cliff, it hadn't ended when the bears disappeared into the forest. It had only just begun. Ethan ventured out on another hike a week later, his camera in hand, as he explored a new trail. The forest was alive with the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. He felt at ease, the earlier unease from the strange events fading into the background. But as he rounded a bend in the trail, the forest fell silent. The sudden absence of sound was unnerving, and Ethan stopped in his tracks. He scanned the trees, his senses alert. A low growl echoed through the woods, deep and menacing. Ethan turned slowly, his heart pounding as he spotted the source of the sound, a mountain lion crouched a few feet away, its golden eyes locked onto him. The predator's muscles were coiled, ready to pounce. Ethan's mind raced, his body frozen in fear, just as the mountain lion shifted, preparing to strike. A thunderous roar shattered the silence from the trees. The mother bear charged forward, her massive frame barreling toward the predator. The mountain lion hesitated, its predatory focus broken by the sudden threat. The bear roared again, louder this time, and the mountain lion bolted into the underbrush, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, his breath shallow, as the mother bear turned to face him. Her cub appeared moments later, peeking out from behind a tree. Ethan's shock gave way to a strange sense of gratitude. The bear had saved him. The mother bear didn't linger. She nudged her sea cub forward, her calm demeanor unchanged. Ethan watched as they retreated into the forest, the same protective air surrounding her it was. Then he realized that they weren't just watching him, they were protecting him. From that moment, Ethan felt a connection to the bears that went beyond explanation they had become a part of. His life's silent guardians of the wilderness they all called home. Ethan was out in the forest again, his camera ready to capture the beauty of the wild. He followed trailless travel, drawn by a strange instinct. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest became. The usual chirping of birds and rustling of leaves faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. As he climbed over a rocky hill, something caught his eye, a shadow moving near a cluster of large boulders. He slowed his pace, his breath shallow, and saw the mother bear. She was standing in front of what looked like a narrow cave entrance, her massive frame blocking the way. The cub peeked out from behind her, its curiosity evident. Ethan stayed still, unsure of what to do. The bear glanced at him, her dark eyes calm but watchful. Slowly, she stepped aside, her movements deliberate, as if granting him permission to approach. Ethan hesitated, but curiosity won over caution. He moved closer, the cool air from the cave brushing against his face. The entrance was tight, but once inside, the space opened up into a small chamber. Ethan's flashlight revealed walls covered in ancient markings, symbols, animals, and what appeared to be human figures. The drawings were crude but striking, etched deeply into the stone. One image stood out, a large bear standing beside a man, their figures intertwined as though they were equals. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The markings seemed to tell a story, one he couldn't fully understand. He spent hours photographing the walls, his mind racing with questions. What was this place, and why was the bear guarding it? Back at his cabin, Ethan contacted M. Sinclair, a local historian known for her knowledge of the area's folklore. When she arrived, her excitement was palpable as Ethan described what he had found. Mava listened intently, her expression serious. When he mentioned the drawings, she explained the legend of the protector bear. Bears an old Native American story passed down through generations. According to the tale, bears chosen by the forest spirit would guard the land and protect those who showed them kindness. The markings in the cave, she suggested, could be tied to this legend. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had always respected nature but never imagined becoming part of something so mystical. Mava urged him to be cautious, warning that some legends held power that shouldn't be taken lightly. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the bear's actions had meaning, as if they were connected to the ancient story in ways he had yet to understand. Ethan couldn't resist returning to the cave the next day. The markings still drew his attention, but this time something else caught his eye. Near the back of the chamber, hidden under loose rocks, he found a small carved stone. The carving was simple but intriguing. It showed a man holding out his hand to a bear cub, while a larger bear stood in the background, watching. Ethan turned the stone over in his hands, its weight solid yet oddly comforting. The carving felt ancient, its edges worn smooth by time. Mava was the first person he thought of when he showed her the stone. Ma's face lit up with astonishment. She explained that such carvings were rare, often used in ceremonies or as talismans. The image, she said, could be interpreted as a prophecy, a sign of a bond between man and bear. Ethan felt a mix of wonder and disbelief. Could his encounter with the bears truly be part of something foretold? Before he could dwell on it, Mava suggested that the bears might be trying to lead him to something deeper. Days later, Ethan noticed a shift in the mother bear's behavior. She no longer kept her distance, but began guiding him through the forest. She would appear at the edge of his cabin, waiting for him to follow, trust in his instincts. Ethan Obliged, she led him to untouched parts of the forest, hidden clearings filled with rare plants, vibrant flowers he'd never seen before, and wildlife that seemed almost unearthly in its beauty. Ethan felt as though he had been given a key to a secret world, one only the bears could unlock. Each step he took deep in the bond between him and the forest. The bears had become more than just creatures of the wild. They were his guides, his protectors. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had been chosen for something greater, a role he didn't yet fully understand. One crisp morning, Ethan set out to photograph a secluded part of the forest that the mother bear had recently shown him. The air was still to still, and an uneasy feeling settled over him as he noticed broken branches and fresh tracks along the path. The prints were from animals. These were boot marks deep and heavy. Heading toward the forest's heart, Ethan quickened his pace, fear gnawing at him as he reached the clearing. The mother bear and her cub appeared, their movements cautious. The bear sniffed the air, her demeanor tense. Ethan froze as the sound of muffled voices and snapping twigs echoed nearby. He crouched low, scanning the area. Through the dense foliage he spotted a group of men armed with rifles. Their movements were methodical, their eyes scanning for any sign of prey. Poachers. Ethan's heart sank as he realized the danger not only to the bears but to the fragile ecosystem of the forest. The poachers set up a crude ambush near the clearing, baiting the area with fresh meat to lure wildlife. Ethan stayed hidden, holding his breath as the mother bear led her cub away from the trap. Her instincts sharp, but the poachers were persistent, moving closer to the bear's retreat. Ethan couldn't stay silent any longer. He threw a rock toward the opposite side of the clearing, creating a loud noise that drew the poachers' attention. They turned their weapons, raised, and headed in the wrong direction. Using the distraction, Ethan moved swiftly to follow the bears, ensuring their safety. The trio found refuge in a thick grove of trees. Ethan whispered reassurances to himself as the mother bear stood protectively over her cub. The tension was palpable, every sound amplified in the silence. They waited until the voices of the poachers faded, the forest swallowing their presence. Ethan knew this wasn't over. Once the coast was clear, he returned to his cabin and immediately contacted local authorities and wildlife protection agencies. He described the poachers' activities and their potential threat to the forest's wildlife. However, his claims were met with skepticism. Without solid evidence, the officials were hesitant to take action. Frustrated but undeterred, Ethan realized he would need to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to Mava, who shared his concern. Together, they began to form a plan to protect the bears and the forest. They called home. Ethan and Mava spent the next few days studying the poachers' movements, using Ethan's knowledge of the forest and Ma's understanding of wildlife behavior. They devised a plan to outwit the intruders. The mother bear, as if sensing their intent, began to cooperate in subtle ways, guiding Ethan to areas where the poachers had recently been active. The plan was simple but risky. Ethan would use his camera traps to capture evidence of the poachers' illegal activities, while Mava coordinated with a wildlife protection agency to bring in reinforcements. The bears, with their keen instincts and strength, would act as a natural deterrent. One evening, Ethan set up a series of bait-free traps near the poachers' usual path. He scattered the area with natural markers that only the bears would recognize: scratches on trees and overturned rocks. The mother bear seemed to understand her movements, deliberate as she led her cub away from danger. The poachers returned the next morning, their traps empty and their frustration evident. They ventured deeper into the forest, unaware that Ethan was tracking their every move from a safe distance. When the poachers stumbled upon The false trail Ethan had created they split up hoping to corner their hurry. That's when the mother bear made her move, emerging from the shadow. She leaded out a deep resonant growl that froze the men in their tracks. The cub stayed hidden as the mother bear advanced, her sheer size and presence enough to send two of the poachers scrambling. Ethan coordinated with Mava via a walkie-talkie, signaling her to alert the authorities. Meanwhile, the remaining poachers attempted to regroup, only to find themselves outmatched by the terrain. The forest seemed to turn against them. Hidden roots tripped them, dense foliage blocked their paths, and the oppressive silence unnerved them. The mother bear and Ethan worked in unison, though no words were exchanged. Ethan used his presence to steer the poachers toward a narrow ravine where their escape routes were limited. The bear's roars echoed through the trees, a sound that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. Despite knowing he was not her target, the air grew heavy with smoke as Ethan's chest tightened in panic. What began as a tense standoff with the poachers had now turned into a race against a raging forest fire. Somewhere deep in the woods, the dry heat had sparked an uncontrollable blaze, and the flames were spreading fast. The mother bear's growl cut through the crackling of the fire. She nudged her cub, urging it to move, and Ethan quickly followed, his heart pounding in rhythm with their hurried steps. The forest seemed alive with chaos. Branches snapped, overhead embers floated like fireflies, and the once green sanctuary was cloaked in an orange glow behind them. The poachers shouted in desperation. They hadn't anticipated the fire either, and were now caught in the same deadly web. Ethan glanced back, his instincts wearing between helping the men and ensuring his own survival. The mother bear growled again, her urgency unmistakable. Ethan pushed forward, knowing he couldn't afford to hesitate. The carved stone in his pocket grew warm, its surface vibrating faintly. Ethan paused, confused by the sensation, but the fire's intensity forced him onward. The path ahead was treacherous, blocked by fallen trees and burning undergrowth. The mother bear, surprisingly calm, led the way, her movements steady and sure. As they neared a steep incline, the ground beneath Ethan gave way, sending him sliding down a rocky slope. He landed hard, the stone tumbling from his pocket and glowing faintly in the ash-covered ground. The mother bear roared, leaping down after him, her cub close behind. Ethan scrambled to his feet, scooping up the stone. Its glow seemed to pulse, lighting a faint path through the dense smoke. The poachers reappeared, their faces streaked with soot, desperation etched into their expressions. They stumbled through the flames, coughing and disoriented, their weapons abandoned in the chaos. For a moment their eyes met Ethan's, and he saw fear, not malice, but there was no time to dwell on their plight. Soon after, Ethan and the mother bear were back to safety after the fire. Ethan remained on edge. The forest was quieter than usual, but its silence carried an unease. The carved stone, now back in his pocket, no longer glowed, but seemed heavier than before. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the forest wasn't done with him yet. One morning, as Ethan stepped outside his cabin, he found the mother bear waiting nearby. She held something unusual in her mouth, a plant with vivid golden leaves and delicate white blossoms. She placed it gently on the ground, nudging it toward him before retreating into the shadows with her cub. Ethan examined the plant carefully, noting its unique features. Unsure of its significance, he brought it to Mava, who immediately recognized it, her face lit with a mixture of astonishment and urgency. She explained that the plant resembled one from old folklore, believed to hold medicinal properties capable of curing diseases no modern medicine could treat. If confirmed, it could save countless lives. Mava and Ethan began researching the plant, consulting biologists and herbalists. Their findings revealed its potential as a cure for a rare but deadly illness affecting local wildlife, and possibly humans. News of the discovery spread quickly, drawing attention from conservationists and, unfortunately, from the poachers. The poachers returned this time with reinforcements. Their numbers had grown, and they were armed with advanced tools, ready to strip the forest of its rare treasures. The once burning fire of their greed was now a roaring blaze, threatening to consume everything. Ethan and the bears held dear. The poachers moved stealthily, marking trees and setting traps. Ethan watched helplessly as they invaded deeper into the wilderness. He knew the bears couldn't fight this battle alone, and the carved stone felt like a distant hope. Mava urged him to contact authorities again, but past experiences left him doubtful they'd act in time. Ethan decided to take a stand. He began to track the poachers' movements, noting their patterns and sabotaging their traps where he could. The mother bear, as though sensing his determination, appeared more frequently, guiding him to safe paths and alerting him to the poachers' locations. One night, Ethan spotted the poachers near a grove of rare plants. The men worked swiftly, uprooting the delicate treasures. Ethan couldn't confront them directly, but took photos and video evidence, determined to expose their crimes. As he crept closer, the sound of the mother bear's warning growl echoed through the forest. The poachers froze, their flashlights darting wildly. The bear's presence forced them to retreat, but Ethan knew they wouldn't stay away, for long time was running out and the forest rare gifts were at stake. Ethan realized he couldn't protect the forest alone. With Ma's help, he began gathering the local community, using the carved stone and the mother bear's story to illustrate the forest's importance. At first, people were skeptical, dismissing his tales as exaggerations, but Ethan's evidence, the glowing stone, the plant's potential as a cure, and footage of the poachers captured their attention. He spoke passionately, sharing how the forest wasn't just a collection of trees but a living, breathing entity that protected them. In return, Mava added her knowledge of the protector bears, emphasizing the role of the community and preserving their shared heritage. Slowly, the townspeople began to understand. Word spread and volunteers came forward. Together, they set up patrols, erected warning signs, and started documenting the forest's rare flora and fauna. Local officials, pressured by the community, finally agreed to send reinforcements to guard the area, but the poachers had one final devastating plan. Frustrated by their failed attempts, they decided to destroy the forest altogether. They planted explosives near the bear's cave, intending to collapse the entire area and claim its resources. Under the guise of a natural disaster, the tension in the air was suffocating as Ethan and the volunteers worked through the night to locate the explosives. Every sound in the forest felt amplified: the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl, and the ominous hum of the timers counting down the carved stone. In Ethan's pocket grew heavier, a silent reminder of the stakes. Unbeknownst to the poachers, the forest wasn't silent. The mother bear and her cub, joined by other animals, were already on the move. Deer darted through the trees, leading the poachers astray, while flocks of birds swooped low, scattering them. The forest seemed alive with resistance, each creature playing its part in protecting their home. Ethan spotted the poachers near the cave, their movements frantic as they finalized their plan. The glow of their flashlights illuminated a pile of explosives placed at the cave's entrance. Ethan knew he had to act fast. He signaled to the volunteers to stay back while he crept closer, his heart pounding. The mother bear appeared from the shadows, her cub trailing behind. She let out a low growl, drawing the poachers' attention. They froze, their weapons trembling in their hands. Before they could react, the bear charged, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Her cub stayed hidden, but the presence Of other animals, wolves, foxes, and even a pair of hawks circling above created chaos amidst the commotion. Ethan reached the explosive. The timers displayed less than 3 minutes. His hands trembled as he began cutting, wires relying on instinct and the faint vibration of the carved stone to guide him. Sweat dripped down his face as he worked the sounds of the animals' coordinated attack, keeping the poachers at bay. One of the poachers, desperate and cornered, spotted Ethan and raised a weapon before he could take aim. The mother bear intervened, her massive form blocking his path. The poacher stumbled backward, his fear outweighing his greed. He dropped his weapon and fled, leaving his comrades to fend for themselves. As the final wire was severed, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Too soon. A stray spark from a damaged explosive ignited a small blast, throwing Ethan backward. The sound echoed through the forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. The mother bear rushed to Ethan's side, nudging him gently. Though dazed and injured, he managed to stand, clutching the carved stone tightly. The poachers, defeated and terrified, were captured by the volunteers who had arrived with local authorities. Ethan watched as the mother bear and her cub retreated into the forest, their forms blending into the shadows. The forest had won, but not without cost. Ethan's injuries served as a painful reminder of the dangers they had faced together. Days after the explosion, Ethan woke in a hospital bed, his body aching, but alive. Mava sat nearby, her face lighting up when she saw him stir. She told him how the community had rallied around him, calling him a hero for his bravery. Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He thought of the forest, the mother bear, and the carved stone that had guided him. His injuries felt like a small price to pay for saving something so precious. As he recovered, visitors came to thank him, locals, environmentalists, and even children who had grown up exploring the forest. The poachers were prosecuted, their crimes laid bare for all to see. With their threat eliminated, the forest began to heal. New shoots sprouted where fires had once raged, and animals returned to their homes. The community, inspired by Ethan's dedication, worked tirelessly to protect the forest. They established protected zones, planted trees, and educated others about the importance of conservation. Ethan, now fully recovered, returned to his cabin at the forest's edge. The mother bear visited occasionally, her cub now growing stronger. Ethan felt a deep connection to them, a bond forged in fire and danger. The carved stone remained on his desk, a constant reminder of the journey he had undertaken. Ethan dedicated himself to the forest preservation, leading community efforts and documenting its beauty for the world to see. The forest, once a battleground, had become a symbol of unity and resilience, a testament to what could be achieved when man and nature stood together. The forest was quiet one crisp autumn morning, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded months earlier. Ethan stood on the porch of his cabin, sipping a steaming cup of tea, watching the golden leaves fall gently to the ground. The mother bear and her cub hadn't visited in weeks, and a strange emptiness had settled over him. Their absence was profound, like losing old friends. Every morning, Ethan scanned the edge of the woods, hoping to catch a glimpse of the familiar figures that had become a part of his life, but the forest seemed to whisper that they were gone. He knew this was their way. The bears belonged to the wild, and their connection had always been fleeting. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ethan decided to take a walk. The carved stone sat on his desk, its glow having faded since the poachers were driven away. He slipped it into his pocket, feeling its cool surface against his palm, and ventured into the woods. The trail felt different, quieter somehow, the forest, though alive with rustling leaves and distant animal calls, seemed to hold its breath as he walked. Ethan remembered the mother bear's gift, a rare plant she had brought him from deep within the forest. Mava had helped identify it as a species long thought extinct, its properties potentially groundbreaking. After rigorous testing and collaboration with researchers, it was discovered that the plant held medicinal properties capable of treating a rare and deadly disease. News of the breakthrough spread quickly, and the plant was cultivated responsibly under strict protection. Ethan's story of the mother bear's gift became a beacon of hope, proving the value of preserving the natural world. But even as his work gained global recognition, Ethan's heart remained tethered to the forest. That night, his steps led him to the clearing where he had first encountered the mother bear and her cub. The memories flooded back, her fierce protection, her calm guidance, and the unspoken bond they had shared. Ethan sat on a fallen log, the stone in his hand. He thought about how much had changed. The forest was thriving, its scars from the fire and the poachers fading with time. The community had transformed, united in their mission to protect the land. Yet despite these victories, Ethan couldn't shake the ache of their absence. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the cool breeze against his face. He imagined the bears somewhere deep in the wilderness, free and untamed, their bond with him now a part of the forest's eternal rhythm. Days turned into weeks, and while the bears never returned, Ethan found solace in the life they had inspired him to lead. His work as a conservationist gained momentum. He traveled the world, sharing his story with communities, scientists, and policy makers. He spoke of the carved stone, the forest's resilience, and the silent guardians who had entrusted him with their secrets. The stone, now a symbol of his journey, became a centerpiece in his presentations. It wasn't just a relic, it was a reminder of the connection between humans and nature, a bond that required respect and care. Ethan's passion ignited a movement inspiring others to fight for endangered species and fragile ecosystems. Here, years later, the rare plant cultivated from the mother bear's gift became a key component in saving countless lives. Hospitals and research facilities worldwide used it to treat diseases that had once been untreatable. Ethan often thought of the bear when he read reports of the lives saved, imagining her watching over him. Still, her gift continuing to make a difference. As time passed, Ethan grew older. The cabin at the forest's edge became both a refuge and a place of reflection. He often sat on the porch, gazing at the woods, his mind filled with memories. The carved stone remained on his desk, its glow faint but steady, as if the forest still watched over him. One winter morning, as snow blanketed the ground, Ethan received a letter. It was an invitation to receive an international award for his contributions to conservation. The recognition was humbling, but Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the bears. They had given him more than a story, they had given him purpose. On the night of the ceremony, Ethan stood before a packed audience. He spoke not of himself, but of the forest, the bears, and the lessons they had taught him. He shared how their gift had saved lives, and how the bond between man and nature could heal even the deepest wounds. After the applause faded, Ethan returned to his cabin feeling a sense of peace. He knew his work would continue through the people he had inspired. The forest, the bears, and the carved stone had become a legacy far greater than he could have imagined. One spring morning, as the first buds began to bloom, Ethan ventured into the woods one last time. He carried the stone with him, its surface smooth and warm in his hand. At the clearing where it had all begun, he placed the stone gently on the ground, a final tribute to the bears and the forest that had changed his life. As he walked away, the forest seemed to hum with life, its whispers carrying a message of gratitude and farewell. Ethan didn't look back, but he felt their presents a quiet reassurance that their bond would endure. The carved stone rested in Ethan's hand for the final time as he prepared to donate it to the National Museum of Conservation. Its surface still held faint traces of warmth, as though the life force pulsed within it. It wasn't an easy decision to part with something so deeply personal, but Ethan knew the stone story was bigger than him. The museum staff greeted Ethan warmly, treating the carved stone with reverence as they placed it in a glass display case. The exhibit, titled Guardians of the Wild, was unveiled with a ceremony. The story of Ethan the bears and their shared fight to protect the forest drew visitors from all over the world. The stone became a symbol of hope, reminding people of the fragile bond between humans and nature. Ethan stood quietly among the crowd, watching children marvel at the glowing artifact and listening to parents explain its significance. For the first time, he truly understood how far their story had traveled. The carved stone wasn't just an object, it was a beacon inspiring others to act with compassion and responsibility toward the world around them. As the evening quieted, Ethan returned to his cabin, the memories of his journey swirling in his mind. That night he dreamed vividly. In his dream, the forest appeared vibrant and alive, its trees towering and majestic. The mother bear stood at the edge of the clearing, her cub now fully grown beside her. They looked at him with calm, knowing eyes. Ethan felt a wave of reassurance as the bears turned and walked deeper into the forest. He followed the path lit by an ethereal glow. As he walked, he saw other animals emerging, deer, foxes, owls, all moving in harmony. They weren't fleeing or fighting, but protecting their home with quiet determination. The vision shifted and Ethan found himself standing at the edge of the forest. He realized the message was clear. The responsibility of safeguarding their home wasn't just his or humanity's, it was shared by all living creatures. Each species in its own way played a role in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. When Ethan awoke, the sense of connection lingered. He felt a renewed purpose, one that extended beyond his previous efforts. His work wasn't just about saving wildlife, but also fostering a deeper understanding of how interconnected the natural world truly was. In the following months, Ethan used his growing platform to advocate more vigorously for wildlife protection. He traveled to schools, universities, and global conferences, sharing stories of the forest and the bears. He highlighted the lessons he had learned about coexistence and the importance of kindness, not just toward animals, but to all forms of life. Ethan collaborated with conservation groups to launch initiatives aimed at protecting endangered species and restoring damaged ecosystems. One campaign, Guardians Together, focused on teaching communities how to live harmoniously with wildlife. The initiative gained momentum, spreading across regions and inspiring grassroots movements. Back in his small town, Ethan noticed changes. The locals, who once viewed the forest as nothing more than a resource to be exploited, now spoke of it with pride. Children led tree planting drives, and families volunteered to maintain trails and wildlife corridors. The community had embraced its role as stewards of the land, mirroring the lessons Ethan had shared. Meanwhile, the museum exhibit became a cultural phenomenon. Visitors left messages of gratitude and pledges to protect nature. In a guest book placed near the carved stone, some even sent letters to Ethan, sharing how his story had inspired them to make changes in their own lives. As Ethan's advocacy work expanded, so did the impact of his message. Governments began implementing stronger wildlife protection laws. Inspired by the story of the bears and their gift, scientists worked tirelessly to preserve rare plant species, including the one the mother bear had brought to Ethan the plant's medicinal properties. Continued to save lives its cultivation, carefully monitored to ensure sustainability despite his newfound fame. Ethan never strayed far from the forest. He still spent quiet mornings on his porch sipping tea and listening to the rustling leaves the forest had given him so much a sense of purpose, a community, and a bond with the wild that would never fade. One day while walking a familiar trail, Ethan paused at the clearing where he had last seen the mother bear and her cub. The area was alive with bird song, and the sunlight filtered through the trees and golden beams. He closed his eyes, feeling the forest pulse, and smiled. He knew the bears were out there, somewhere in the wilderness, continuing to protect their home just as he was protecting his. Their connection wasn't bound by time or space. It was eternal, a testament to the power of unity and kindness. The carved stone remained in the museum, its glow a reminder of the extraordinary bond between man and nature. But for Ethan, the true legacy was the change that had sparked in people's hearts through the bears, the forest, and the stone. He had found a way to inspire others to see the world differently, to cherish it, nurture it, and fight for it. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan set out on a walk along a less traveled trail. Deep within the forest, the air was cool, and the leaves were a mix of fiery orange and golden yellow. Though the path was unfamiliar, Ethan felt an inexplicable pull to keep moving forward. The forest was alive with quiet whispers of wind through the trees and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. After hours of walking, Ethan stumbled upon something unusual hidden beneath a dense cover of ivy and moss. Was the entrance to a cave. It was smaller than the one he had encountered before, but its presence was unmistakable as he stepped closer. A faint glow emanated from inside, similar to the light of the carved stone that had once guided him inside. Ethan found walls adorned with intricate markings, much like the ones in the first cave. The patterns told a story of protector bears in a different part of the forest. These bears, like the one he had encountered, seemed to safeguard another region. The markings hinted at an unbroken cycle where the role of guardianship passed from one generation to the next. Ethan felt a deep sense of awe. The discovery reinforced what he had always believed: the forest and its protectors existed in harmony, ensuring the balance of nature. But the markings also carried a warning. They depicted the struggles between the protectors and forces of destruction, a reminder that the cycle could be disrupted if not carefully preserved. Inspired by this discovery, Ethan returned to the town with a renewed sense of purpose. He shared the story of the new cave with Mave and the community. They were captivated, and the tale of the protector bears began to spread far beyond their small town. People traveled from nearby villages to hear Ethan speak, drawn by the mystery and the lessons embedded in the story. With the support of the community, Ethan decided to take his mission a step further. He used his growing influence to open a wildlife sanctuary near the forest. The sanctuary became a haven for injured animals, a place where they could heal and be released back into the wild. It also served as an educational center, teaching visitors, especially children, about the importance of protecting wildlife and treating animals with kindness. The sanctuary quickly became a beacon of hope. Families visited to learn about the forest's ecosystem and the stories of the protector bears. Children listened with wide eyes as Ethan recounted his adventures, describing the bravery of the mother bear and her cub. He taught them that animals, like humans, had families, emotions, and a deep connection to their homes. One day, Ethan spoke to a group of children who had never been taught to value animals. He explained how even the smallest act of kindness could make a difference. He shared how the mother bear had risked her life to save her cub and how their actions had inspired him to protect the forest. The children asked questions, their curiosity growing. With every answer, Ethan told them that kindness wasn't just about helping animals, it was about creating a world where all living beings could thrive together. He encouraged them to look beyond their fears and see the beauty in the creatures they once thought were frightening or unimportant. By the end of the day, the children were planting trees and helping build shelters for the sanctuary's animals, their hearts touched by the stories they had heard. This sanctuary also became a hub for researchers and conservationists. They studied the rare plants, including the one given to Ethan by the mother bear, which was now being used to treat diseases worldwide. The plant's properties were carefully cultivated, ensuring that its benefits could be shared without harming the forest's delicate balance. As the years passed, the sanctuary grew in size and reputation. Ethan's story was featured in books, documentaries, and educational programs. But despite the recognition, Ethan remained grounded. He spent most of his time walking through the sanctuary, tending to the animals and speaking with visitors. He believed his greatest achievement wasn't the fame, but the spark of change he saw in people's hearts. One evening, Ethan received a letter from a child who had visited the sanctuary years ago. The child, now a young adult, wrote about how the experience had shaped their life. They had become a conservationist working to protect endangered species in another part of the world. They thanked Ethan for teaching them the value of kindness and the importance of protecting nature. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the legacy of the protector bears wasn't just about preserving the forest, it was about inspiring others to carry the message forward. The cycle of guardianship wasn't limited to bears, it extended to humans who chose to protect the world around them. One day, as Ethan walked along the trail near the new cave, he paused and placed his hand on the markings. He thought about the mother bear, her cub, and the unseen protectors who continued their work elsewhere. He understood now that the bond he had felt with the bears was part of a larger story, one that connected all living beings in a shared responsibility to protect their home. The moral of Ethan's journey was clear: kindness, whether toward animals, people, or the environment, created ripples that could transform the world. By recognizing the value of every living thing, humans could restore the balance that had been disrupted for so long. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a warm golden glow, Ethan stood quietly, feeling the pulse of life around him. He knew his work was far from over, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The legacy the protector bears lived on in the sanctuary, in the carved stone, and in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by their story. The forest hummed with quiet gratitude, and Ethan walked away, confident that the cycle would continue for generations to come, from being a photographer to being an advocate for wildlife security. This is a story Ethan would never ever forget, and would continue to spread around all through his remaining days. What do you think about Ethan's actions towards saving the cub? Would you have taken such a risk if it were you? Would you have fought against humans to save a bear and wildlife as a whole? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching and for being part of this journey with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe for more stories. We'll see you in the next video.